All right, so let's dive in today. We're tackling the 80-20 principle. And I know you're probably familiar with it. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. But knowing about it and actually using it to unlock some serious efficiency, those are two very different things.
Absolutely. The 80-20 principle or Pareto principle, it isn't about being mathematically precise. It's more like a guiding principle, like a lens to help us see those hidden imbalances that exist in pretty much everything.
Okay, so it's not about crunching numbers all day. How does this actually play out in the real world?
Well, imagine a company, hundreds of clients. It's often the case that a handful of those clients, maybe 20%, generate the bulk of the revenue, maybe 80%. Or think about daily tasks. You probably have a few crucial activities that really move the needle on your projects, while others just sort of exist.
So it's about recognizing that not all efforts are created equal. Some have a bigger impact than others. That's where things get interesting, right? If we can actually pinpoint that vital 20%, we can potentially work smarter, not harder.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. It's not about doing less. It's about being strategic, focusing energy on the things that truly matter.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? How do we go from knowing about it to actually using it?
Well, one way is to think about it in terms of decluttering. Literally and figuratively. Take your wardrobe, for instance. Do you really wear everything in there? Chances are you have a core set of clothes, maybe 20% of your wardrobe, that you absolutely love and wear all the time.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a pile of sweaters. I haven't touched them in years. So are you saying we should toss the other 80%?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But maybe it's time to reassess what's really serving you.
Yeah.
By simplifying, you're not just creating physical space.
Yeah.
You're also freeing up mental energy that you can direct towards something more important.
Okay, so it's about getting rid of the things that are weighing us down, literally and figuratively. I guess this idea can be applied to more than just clothes, right?
Absolutely. Think about work tasks. Are there a few crucial activities that drive the majority of your results? What if you could identify and prioritize those, maybe even delegate, or eliminate the less impactful tasks?
So instead of trying to do everything, we should focus on becoming really good at the things that matter.
Precisely. And that's where specific tools and techniques can come in handy. Have you ever heard of the Eisenhower matrix?
That rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
It's a simple but powerful tool for prioritizing. You divide your tasks into 4 quadrants based on their urgency and importance. Urgent and important tasks get your immediate attention, while less urgent and less important might be delegated or even eliminated.
Oh, that's right. I've seen that before. So this is an example of how we can use a specific technique to actually apply the 80-20 principle to our work. I like it.
Exactly. And this is just one example. There are many other tools and strategies that can help. Pinpoint that vital 20% and maximize your efforts.
This is already making me rethink how I approach my to-do list. So we've talked about wardrobes and work tasks. I'm guessing this can be applied to other areas of life too, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's what we'll delve into next. From time management to business strategies to even personal growth, the 80-20 principle can be a game changer.
Okay. I'm officially intrigued. Let's get into it. So where do we go from here? How can our listeners use this to actually manage their time better?
Time management. That's a fantastic example. Instead of trying to cram more into your schedule, the 80-20 principle encourages you to identify those activities that give you the most bang for your buck.
Okay, I like that. But how do we figure that out?
It starts with honestly assessing how you spend your time now. Maybe track your activities for a week, even if it's jotting down notes in a notebook. You might be surprised by where your time and energy go.
I think a lot of people avoid doing that. They're afraid of what they'll find.
True. But that self-awareness is crucial. Once you have a clearer picture of your current time allocation, you can look for patterns. Which activities consistently produce the most significant results? Which ones take up time, but aren't really moving the needle?
And then comes the hard part, actually changing our behavior.
It can be challenging, but it's incredibly rewarding. Maybe it's about blocking out specific times for high-impact activities, or learning to say no to commitments that don't align with your priorities.
So it's about being more intentional with our time and making sure we're focusing on the things that really matter.
Exactly. And remember, what constitutes the vital few can change. It's not a static thing. What worked last year or even last month might not be the most effective approach today.
That's a good point. We have to be adaptable, willing to reassess our priorities as things change. Now, you mentioned businesses use this principle too. What does that look like?
The 80-20 principle is a goldmine for entrepreneurs and business leaders. It can really help with profitability and efficiency. We talked about a small number of clients, generating most of a company's revenue. But there are so many other ways businesses can use this.
I'm all ears.
Think about product development. A company might have a wide range of products, but it's often a smaller subset. That's driving most of the sales and profit. By identifying those, they can focus on refining those offerings, maybe even phasing out products that aren't doing well.
So instead of spreading themselves thin, they can concentrate on the things that are already working.
Exactly. It's about recognizing where their efforts will have the greatest impact and putting resources there.
It almost sounds like a treasure map for businesses, guiding them toward the areas of greatest potential.
I like that. It encourages businesses to be laser-focused, to invest their resources where they'll have the most impact. And this principle isn't just about maximizing profits. It can also help with decision-making.
That's interesting. How so?
We often face so much information when making decisions, both in our personal and professional lives. The 80-20 principle can help us cut through the noise and focus on the key factors that truly influence the outcome.
So instead of getting bogged down in a million tiny details, we can train ourselves to hone in on the 20% that matters.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, what are the essential elements here? What are the key drivers?
I imagine that can be incredibly helpful in a fast-paced business environment.
Absolutely. It's about making informed decisions, quickly and efficiently, without getting lost in all the tiny details. And it's not just for CEOs. This applies to anyone who needs to prioritize, from managers delegating tasks to people figuring out where to spend their time.
So far, we've talked a lot about applying this to work and business, but how can we use it for personal growth?
This is where it gets exciting. It's the idea that a few key habits can really impact our overall well-being. We're talking about things like exercise, healthy eating,
Mindfulness.
or learning new skills.
Okay, I see how that fits. We all know we should be doing those things, but it's hard to make them stick. So are you saying that if we identify and prioritize those key habits, we'll see bigger results?
Exactly. It's about focusing on the actions that have the most leverage for your physical and mental health. Imagine if you could identify, say, 3 habits that, if you practice them consistently, would dramatically improve your life. Wouldn't that be worth focusing on?
Absolutely. It's like we're hacking the system by focusing on the things that lead to the biggest results. I love it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about streamlining your efforts and focusing on what matters.
And it also connects back to decluttering, right? But this time, we're decluttering our habits
Yeah.
and routines to make space for the things that nourish us.
Exactly. It's about creating space for what matters, both literally and figuratively. And sometimes that means letting go of things that might be good, but aren't truly great.
I think that's an important point. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to do everything that we lose sight of what's important. Now, earlier, you mentioned an example from the business world. Do you have any examples of how people use this for personal growth?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember reading about this woman. She was feeling so overwhelmed by her busy schedule. She was trying to do it all: work, family, social life, hobbies, and she was feeling stressed and exhausted. She decided to use the 80-20 principle to try to simplify her life and get back some of her time and energy.
What did she do? I'm hooked.
Well, she started by tracking her time and energy for a week. Just like we talked about, she was honest with herself about which activities were energizing her and which ones were draining her.
And what did she find?
She realized that she was spending a lot of time on things that weren't fulfilling. For example, she was going to a lot of social events out of obligation, more than genuine enjoyment. She was also spending hours scrolling through social media, which left her feeling drained and uninspired.
Okay. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Absolutely. So she decided to make some changes. She started saying no to events, especially those that didn't interest her. She also limited her social media to 30 minutes a day.
That's a big change. I wonder what happened.
It worked. She found that she had more time and energy to spend on the things that mattered to her, spending time with family, pursuing hobbies, and taking care of herself.
So by letting go of the things that were draining her, she was able to create space for more joy and fulfillment.
Exactly. And that's the power of it. It's not about deprivation. It's about making choices and prioritizing. It's about making sure that your actions align with your values and goals.
This is really making me think about how I spend my time and energy. I feel like I could really use this.
I encourage you to give it a try. Start with one area where you'd like to see improvement and experiment. Don't try to do everything at once. Small changes can make a big difference.
Great advice. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Time management, business, personal growth. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear about your own experiences. With the 80-20 principle, have you personally used it to achieve results in your own life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've used the 80-20 principle in lots of areas of my life, both personal and professional. One example that comes to mind is when I was writing my first book.
Oh, a book. That's a big project.
Yeah.
How did the 80-20 principle help with that?
Well, I was feeling really overwhelmed by the scope of the project. So much research, so many chapters to write, and deadlines. I knew I needed a way to focus and make the most of my time.
So you turned to the 80-20 principle.
Exactly. I started by breaking the project down into its core parts. I asked myself, what are the most important chapters? Which sections will have the biggest impact? What research is absolutely essential?
So you were identifying the 20% of the project that would produce 80% of the results.
Precisely. Once I had a better idea of those key things, I could prioritize my time. I made sure to schedule blocks for those chapters and more time for research in those key areas.
Did that approach help to stay on track and avoid feeling overwhelmed?
Absolutely. By focusing on those things, I was able to make progress without feeling like I was behind. It also helped me avoid getting bogged down in perfectionism. I knew that every sentence didn't have to be perfect, as long as the main message was clear.
That's a good point. I think a lot of us get caught up trying to make everything perfect, and it can be paralyzing. So by focusing on the 20% that really matters, you were able to get the work done.
Exactly. It's about being strategic and making choices that help you reach your goals. It's not just about writing books. I've used this principle to work better, be more productive, and even make better decisions in my personal life.
I'm seeing now how this can apply to so many different things. It's like a way to achieve more with less. But are there any downsides? What if we miss something important by focusing too much on just a few things?
That's a good question. And it's a valid concern. The 80-20 principle is a great tool, but it's not perfect. It's important to be smart about how we use it.
So what should we watch out for?
One risk is being too rigid. It's a guideline, not a rule. Sometimes it makes sense to do things differently, especially if we need a more well-rounded approach.
So we need to be flexible and adapt.
Exactly. Another thing to remember is that the 80-20 principle isn't about ignoring everything else. It's about understanding the impact of what we do and making good choices about where to focus our energy. Sometimes those things that seem less important can help us in ways we didn't expect.
So it's about balance, focusing on the important things, but not ignoring everything else. It sounds like this is about our mindset as much as it is about specific techniques.
You're right. The 80-20 principle is about being intentional, efficient, and effective. It's about always asking, what's the most impactful thing here? And how can I get the most out of my efforts?
This has been a great conversation. I feel like I have some new ideas for how to approach my work and my life. I'm going to try using the 80-20 principle. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
I would say start small. Pick one area where you want to improve and try using the 80-20 principle there.
Yeah.
Don't try to change everything at once. Remember, it takes time. There will be times when it works great and times when you need to change your approach.
So be open to learning and growing, and don't be afraid to try things out and find what works for you.
Exactly. The 80-20 principle can be used in many different ways to fit your own situation and goals. So, as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What's one area of your life where you could use this principle? What would it be like to focus on the most important things and let go of the rest?
That's a great question. We encourage you to keep exploring, try it out, and see what you can achieve. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.